Welcome to Turning Point, a podcast series brought to you by EuroIntervention. In this 20th anniversary special, we sit down with clinicians, researchers, mentors, and innovators to explore the moments that shape their paths and to reflect on the values we share: curiosity, education, collaboration, and a commitment to improving patient care. Because every journey has a turning point, and everyone has a story to tell. My name is Aisha Kader, and I'm your host. I'm joined today by Professor Lorenz Räber, who is a Professor of Cardiology at the University of Bern, interventional cardiologist, and Director of Catheterization Laboratory at Inselspital. He is a board member of EuroIntervention and was part of the editorial team of Professor Patrick Serruys. In this episode commemorating EuroIntervention's 20th anniversary, we will discuss on fellowship and friendship and its impact on a successful career. Welcome, Lorenz.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for having me.
Well, it's great to have you join us on this podcast. So let's talk about your fellowship at Rotterdam. You have joined the team of Professor Serruys in Rotterdam in 2010. What led you there?
So at this point in time when I spent 2 years in Rotterdam, I did general internal medicine training for 2 years. That was followed by a general cardiology training that lasted 4 years, and then really the time came to go abroad. So Professor Serruys, as you know, was extremely well known still today, and at that time for his pivotal work in the entire coronary field at that time, I would say. He did all the large trials. He was a giant in, and is still a giant in cardiology. On top of that, of course, he was in Rotterdam, the epicenter of interventional cardiology, and he was the founder and editor-in-chief of EuroIntervention, a growing journal. That were the main reasons. But what I realized then when actually arriving there is that Rotterdam also has established a PhD program, the CUR program, which allowed to do a PhD during my stay abroad. That was actually a highly structured program that coming from Switzerland, where PhD had absolutely no role at that time, was a surprise to see, because they offered like structured courses in statistics, in clinical research, etc. So that was a great asset.
That's actually very interesting that you were offered this PhD while it was not an opportunity you had back in Bern at the time. So tell us about your experience then. Did you then initially join as an interventional procedural fellowship, or was this a research fellowship? And tell us about the projects that you were able to get involved in at the time.
Yeah, so the plan from the very beginning was to do a research fellowship only. I was in a lucky situation that I got already some interventional training back home in Bern under the guidance of Professor Meyer and Windecker for like half a year. And importantly, also got promised a position after this purely research fellowship when coming back. But I think the crucial thing is that you know why you go abroad. And in my case, it was really to get knowledge on clinical research and the related methods. I think I realized from when talking to other colleagues that clinical research really also need to be learned. You have to acquire skills to do that. And this was the motivation really to go abroad and to only to be focused only on clinical research. And obviously in Rotterdam, there was plenty of opportunities to do research, clinical research, due to the fact that cardialysis is also located there. That's a large research facility, including a large core lab where lots of clinical trial analyses are being run. And as part of that, the fellows could help in doing sub-analysis. And for that reason, there were many interesting research projects and studies going on mainly in the field of braking technologies. Like at that point in time, there was much about the Absorb. That was this absorbable the first observable scaffold, and all the trials were actually run by Rotterdam at that time, which really offered great opportunities.
That's great. You really did describe it aptly by calling it the epicenter of coronary research at the time. And it's also interesting that you mentioned how important it is to learn clinical research skills, dedicating years of fellowship to that. So in this period, were you worried at all that you would de-skill procedurally with your interventional procedures by spending so much time out of the cath lab?
Well, I had many other worries, but not that one. My key worry was how to get access to good projects, how to to become involved. And ultimately, of course, the biggest worry was that at the end of the stay, you would come back with knowledge on new methods and, of course, some papers as first author. And, this was an environment where there were like 15 fellows, and of course everybody had the same aim. So it was also quite a competition among the fellows. There was lots of friendship, but also a healthy competition, I would say. So the primary worry was really to get access to promising research methods, to get exposure to learn new methods, and that was my primary worry. The worry of losing skills was not really there, because as a young intervention cardiologist, knowing that I would get exposure once I'm back in Bern, that was not really a worry for me.
That's a very positive and reassuring attitude, which I'm sure many current interventional fellows would appreciate, especially those interested in doing research, I think. But you weren't just doing research only there, were you? You were also part of the editorial work at the journal, EuroIntervention. Tell us a bit more about that experience. How did you get involved? How was the whole process overall?
That was very interesting and fascinating at the same time. So how did it work? So as you know, Professor Serruys founded and has contributed substantially to the growth of EuroIntervention at its onset. The EuroIntervention office was located at the same facility, so we basically almost shared offices. So every Thursday there was an editorial board meeting with all the experts from Rotterdam and also abroad. And what they did during that editorial board meeting, I did not know at that time what they do during that 2 hours meeting, but we were invited to attend this meeting. And not only that, but we were asked to review papers as young fellows, and then also to present our review orally. So you had to be well prepared, because imagine professors sitting there and all the acknowledged experts from all the fields, the many fields surrounding intervention cardiology. So you had to do a damn good job when presenting your review, and then occasionally also defending your position against all the others that are sitting there. So and with that exposure, you learned how to judge on others' research, and finally, of course, you got the feedback from the experienced editors, and that really allowed to build up skills in judging others' research and in editorial activity. That was an absolute unique opportunity. I don't believe it exists anywhere else nowadays that fellow have access to such board meetings. It was a unique experience from which I benefit still today when reviewing paper, or I'm also in other editorial boards from other journals, and I still thinking back always at that time.
It's such an interesting perspective, because currently editorial board meetings, reviewers, everything happens online, and the feedback you get is usually a line or two if you get any feedback at all. So this process where you literally had to defend your review must have been a rigorous but also great learning opportunity for all of you. I want to touch a little bit more on what you said about the healthy competition and the fellowship that you built with the other fellows around there, because you have worked with many of them on projects as well. And most importantly, one of them that we know very well of is the OCT Atlas. Tell us how this idea was developed, and how Professor Serruys' teaching at the time had impacted you in involving fellows in your research projects.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned the OCT Atlas. That was a huge project for us, at least as being fellows. Optical coherence tomography at that time was a young technology that was not available in many cath labs, but I had the privilege to already have performed in Bern since I think 2 or 3 years optical coherence tomography together with my boss Stefan Windecker, and so we had a kind of a library available. And then I was lucky enough to meet a colleague fellow, Maria Radu from Rikshospital in Copenhagen at that time, and she shared this interest. She also brought with her lots of images, and there was not really something available to guide people to let understand these images. So we came up together with Professor Serruys with the great idea to do an atlas, a compendium, an atlas of OCT images. So how have we done this? First of all, we looked at our own material from Copenhagen, from Bern, but also from Rotterdam. And then, of course, under the guidance of Professor Serruys, we put together chapters. We identified international collaborators. They were all contacted by him. And of course, when you get contacted by the boss himself, they agreed to participate, and we took over. And the end product was like an atlas, and that was composed of more than 1,000 images with figure legends. And one particular feature as well was that it was available on the iPad. So that was also new at that time. It was not a book, a printed book, but it was rather available online. And at the end, we got great feedback. And it was a bit ahead of time because, as you know, it still took like 10 years in addition until OCT really was spread or entered clinical routine, let's say, now with the Class 1A recommendation to guide PCI.
That's really interesting how that project was developed. And when you said about international collaborators, it's a testament to the productive impact that can come out of good collaborative work in cardiology, especially interventional cardiology. Also, we know that, as you said, with Maria Radu, many fellows form lifelong bonds during their years at fellowship. So are there any other friendships that from that time that continue on today? And how has this impacted your clinical and research practice?
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow I will meet with former Rotterdam fellows for dinner. We do that traditionally on the occasion of all the congresses we have in various compositions, actually, because there were many fellows. And so there is a long-standing friendship that you can build up based on such fellowships. I mean, that's something very important because, you live together in an exceptional way because you're probably separated from all the other tasks you're obliged to do at home. So you're free and you can dedicate, your time to what you like to do, and the others like the same thing, and all are dedicated. And you also spend spare time together. So we went for bike tours, did parties, barbecues, etc. So you actually like a family. It was the Rotterdam family, and this put strong bonds, and they last for decades. That's about the personal relation, but then of course it has also impact on your work because you build up trust with these people, no? And trust is something on which you can base strong collaborations also in research. If you know, okay, this colleague is expert in this and that, I may call him and I ask him for advice. Or if you want to run a multi-center trial where, usually you don't have sufficient funding. So it means that those who participate in the trial need to work not for nothing, but of course for the sake of generating new data. But it's painful at the end, no? Because you do usually need to do that in your spare time. There's never enough money there. So there needs to be motivation. And of course, to contact friends is another thing than to contact people who you don't know. So the fellowship connections allow you to, build on a network that you form in a crucial phase of your career that you can activate at any point in time. And I think this is really a crucial benefit of spending a fellowship at an institution with many fellows.
That's a really great point, to have that network of like-minded individuals where you can propagate all the positive ideas that come to your mind, both research-wise as well as clinically. I want to touch a bit on one of your best cited papers. You have done a lot of work on OCT, and you've co-authored one of the best cited papers on EuroIntervention. Tell us, how did this come about? What impact did this network of fellows have on it? And perhaps even outside of it, tell us about writing a position paper of that extent and the experience of it.
Yeah, so this is about a consensus paper on the clinical use of intracoronary imaging in daily routine. At that time, it was published in 2018 in EuroIntervention and the European Heart Journal. There was not so much about this topic. It was far away from a class 1A recommendation as we have it now since 24. And the operators did not know exactly which criteria they should apply. And at that time, in 2016, actually, I got a call by Dr. Chwalyumi, who invited me to participate there. And why did he call me? Probably because I had the great luck and opportunity to build up a great experience in Rotterdam, and then with further activity on that very topic. And then I had the pleasure to act in this consensus paper as a first author with like 20 experts from around the world, and some of them also I knew, of course, from the Rotterdam time. The paper actually came up with recommendation how to optimize PCI, and there were not much RCT data available, so it was mainly based on observational evidence. And it was then nice to see that some RCTs, like the Renovite PCI, took up exactly those criteria and validated them actually in the setting of a randomized controlled trial, and it turned out to be positive to findings, which, as I said, led to a class 1A recommendation. So this was a very challenging but also very nice experience to work within a large group of experts to really find consensus, because opinions, of course, were not always the same. So you had to moderate on various opinions, and then to also write that down in a document. Actually, there were two. The second one was then first authored by Tom Johnson and had more focus on ACS. And yes, looking back, we're very lucky. It was very successful, almost 1,000 citations. And but even more important, the use of imaging is increasing in routine clinical practice. That's of course the best to observe.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting to hear of how the evolution of work that you have done, research-wise as well as clinically, has contributed to this very impactful product in the end. And I think it's something that many contemporary interventional fellows would envy in terms of the opportunities as well as creating that impact that you're able to have done. So many of them are also wary of stepping into research, and we talked a bit about this. You said it was the least of your worries, but what is the advice you would give interventional fellows who would want to get involved in research and also do well at it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very clear that first of all, you need to be, if you want to become an interventional cardiologist, you have to be able to do in a safe and efficacious manner the interventions. That's clear. That's the very basis. I would say patient first. That's always the credo. But if you are interested in doing clinical research and you want to achieve a certain professional level, I think you do need specific training. And for that, you have to plan a fellowship abroad. And the key issue is to plan it well. So what does it mean? It means you need to choose wisely the center. It needs to be a center with high scientific output, for sure. And to find out, you need to read the papers of these sites and also identify potential tutors who could potentially take care of you. Even more before, of course, you need to select the topic that is of interest to you. I mean, that's the motivation is the absolute essential. You need to identify the topic and then see where is great activity surrounding these topics, and that you can measure by publications. You have to read them, and then you need to contact former fellows who were there, because they will tell you the truth about this place. They will tell you top or flop. And if top, they will advise you on how to approach and how to behave at this particular site to be successful. And then one thing that is important is ideally you obtain a grant. And when people are applying now to our institution in Bern, I realized that this is not, that they don't consider this as important from the beginning, but this needs a bit of planning. Now, to apply for a grant, it needs to be clear that you need to plan beforehand, like 2 or 3 years before. No? So you can't just apply for a fellowship next year and then also apply for a grant and hope that you will be successful. That's really not possible. So it needs a certain planning, ideally 2 years before you spend then the fellowship. And if you can obtain a grant, it will allow you a bit to act flexible. No, and then another important aspect is you need to even think further. You need to think, what is when I'm coming back? Because if you spend a great fellowship on a great topic and you were successful, you should ideally have a position when coming back. So you need already to talk to the people at home or at other institutions in the country you live in, whether they would be interested to offering you a position after your research stay. And then the final thing, which is also probably relevant, is when choosing the topic. Of course, the most important is that you're highly interested into the topic. But one consideration that you may do in addition is that there is not already somebody at home covering entirely this topic. Because what will be the result is you come home, you had maybe good papers, lots of success, and then you are in direct competition at home, which can destroy everything that you build up. So it seems complex, but these are some considerations that I usually advise to our fellows to do before identifying an ideal site, and then before spending 1 or 2 years. And actually, a final thing is the productivity. My old boss, Professor Hess, always said, listen, productivity is defined by 1 year abroad, 1 paper. And I think that's a good rule of thumb, that if you spend 1 year, that's almost nothing. You should probably spend 2 years to really get the skills for research and to be successful in publishing. 1 year is almost nothing. 1 year, you need 6 months to be, you need to be introduced to the group, to know how it goes, and how everything works. And then the next 6 months you can really focus on your work, but then you already need to leave if you only have 1 year. So that will not be so successful. So therefore I advise 2, ideally 3 years. But still consider what will happen once you're back.
That's really, really great, practical, your very forthcoming advice that many fellows listening to this podcast will benefit from. It will resonate with most of them, especially in terms of how important it is to time things well. And you did say patients first, and patients first means good procedural planning. Similarly, I think a good, impactful career where you can best serve patients also requires very good planning, both from a personal as well as professional aspect. The advice you shared might be and very important in terms of the turning point of many early career researchers. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Turning Point, a special podcast series celebrating EuroIntervention's 20th anniversary.